I want to welcome you to the Law Enforcement Center, the home of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. Today is an exciting day. It's one that's been long awaited. And we are pleased to announce that Governor Roy Cooper signed the Pretrial Integrity Act earlier today, also known as House Bill 813, making it the newest law in the state of North Carolina. This signing marks the end of an exhaustive effort to pass this act into law and the beginning of more accountability for violent criminals in our city. Our very own Chief Jennings has been instrumental in the development of this law, and he will come now to share his thoughts. Chief.
Right. Thank you, and thanks everyone for being here. So you saw me and heard me stand before the North Carolina House Committee 2 months ago in Raleigh and make the statement that we need help. And I've been saying repeatedly for many months and citing many cases about we need help. Everyone's accountable within the criminal justice system to ensure that we keep our citizens safe. When you see a violent offender that gets out of jail within 37 minutes because of an unsecured bond, that's a pure example of why we need help. And last night we arrested, after 4 months, 4-month search for a couple who just abused their children or abused their child to the point of permanent damage. And you see that that person is set, that couple was set for a $15,000 unsecured bond. And luckily, that bond was raised up for at least one of the suspects in that case to $50,000 by the judge. However, that's a prime example of why we call out and say that we need help. We have to ask ourselves, where is the accountability within the criminal justice system? And we talk about accountability all the time, but we usually focus that on 1 or 2 small areas within the system. And we often forget that the criminal justice system is made up of a lot of different components, and every single one of those components should be held accountable. As the chief of police, my job is to ensure that there is safety and security for all of our citizens within Mecklenburg County. And when I have a voice to be able to hold all parts of the justice system accountable, I'm going to take advantage of that. You know, at the beginning of the year, the Pretrial Integrity Act, we talked about what we wanted to do and how we wanted to move forward with this. It was simply just a concept, an idea, and thoughts that we had discussed not only internally, but along with the district attorney and chief district court judge. And we didn't quite know how we were going to get there. You know, our goal the whole time was to establish accountability when it comes to pretrial release, and to make sure that the decision to let people to be able to set a bond and to let people out had more accountability and came from a judge and not a magistrate. And we felt that was important. The judges are accountable to the people that elected them in the office. And we wanted to make sure that we added consistency across the state, not just in Mecklenburg County, but across the state, to ensure that we had integrity when it came to who we are releasing back out of jail when they commit violent offenses and repeat violent offenders. So what will this do? We talked about the Pretrial Integrity Act, or House Bill 813. What this does is takes a lot of the decision for pretrial release for certain criminal offenses out of the hands of a magistrate and into the hands of a judge. It also puts accountability to the point of, if someone is currently out on pretrial release, they will also have to go before a judge if they reoffend and get rearrested outside of certain traffic offenses. So we needed help to bring relief for our communities. Imagine that you're a community member and someone commits a violent crime in your community only to see that they get out either the same day or the very next day. What trust would you have as a citizen in our criminal justice system? how would you be cooperative with law enforcement if you see that happens on a regular basis? And also imagine law enforcement officers who work tirelessly, as we saw with this case with the abused child. And they spend hours and hours of work only to have that offender, once they develop probable cause, go through a revolving door and get right back out again. So House Bill 813 will help us hold more accountability across the board when it comes to not just the offenders, but those who make those decisions for setting bonds. So I'm proud to say the bill overwhelmingly passed with bipartisan support, both in the House and the Senate. And now that we see that the governor has signed this bill, it will become law effective October 1st. When I asked for help with our legislature, they listened. And I think that's an important step in the right direction for accountability across all of the criminal justice system. I do want to thank District Attorney Spencer Mayweather and Judge Elizabeth Trosh, Chief District Court Judge Elizabeth Trosh. And when I talk about how we started out, this was simply a concept and a conversation. That's how it started, with those two by my side, and a lot of conversations and where we want to go and where we want to take this. I also want to thank Representative John Bradford, who signed on early as a key sponsor for this bill, and had conversations, numerous conversations with him all the way through on how do we make sure that this gets through. And finally, I do want to thank Governor Roy Cooper for doing what's right and signing this into law. And I'm excited to see October 1st this goes into law. And like I've mentioned before, it's not going to be the total answer for everything, but it certainly is a step in the right direction, and it's going to make a difference in our criminal justice system. I'm going to turn it back over to Lieutenant Petrus to kind of go over what this Pretrial Integrity Act entails and how it came to fruition. Thank you.
So we'll move on to your questions for Chief Jennings shortly, but before we do that, I'd like to just give you a breakdown of the law and how we got to this point. The inspiration for the Pretrial Integrity Act came from right here in Charlotte over a year ago. Chief Jennings, District Attorney Spencer Mayweather, and Judge Elizabeth Trosh all realized the need for the change in how the phase between arrest and trial works in our criminal justice system. They put their collective heads together and laid out a vision as to how to bring more accountability to the system while still remaining fair. The goal has always been increased public safety in our community. Thanks to a number of North Carolina legislators, the vision that they had became a formal bill in the North Carolina General Assembly, introduced in the House of Representatives on April 18th of 2023. On May 3rd, the bill passed the House with overwhelming support. On May 3rd, the bill passed the House with overwhelming support, and then moved on to the North Carolina Senate, where it was passed on June 22nd, 2023. The bill went back to the House because of a small amendment and was passed again there overwhelmingly on June 27th and made its way to Governor Cooper's desk. Today, as you've heard, Governor Cooper has signed that bill into law. This law makes it so that a judge, as opposed to a magistrate, is required to set the conditions of release for those arrested for 18 outlined offenses. This brings accountability because judges are elected and therefore accountable to the people. The 18 offenses include murder, kidnapping, rape, sex offenses, human trafficking, assault with a deadly weapon with the intent to kill, inflicting serious injury, shooting into an occupied property, burglary, arson, and armed robbery. The law also states that a judge must be the one to set conditions of release if a person is arrested for a new offense while they are already out on pretrial release for another offense. As you've heard, this law will go into effect on October 1st, 2023, and will apply to offenses committed on or after that date. We'll now open it up to questions. for Chief Jennings on the topic of the Pretrial Integrity Act.
Chief Jennings, as far as how it works specifically, a lot of people watching this may not understand. Once you guys arrest someone for, let's say, first-degree murder, they go before a magistrate, they set bond until they go before a judge, probably the next day for that first appearance. This will mean they are held at least overnight until they go before that judge?
That's correct. So just for those 18 offenses that you've heard listed, if you're arrested for those offenses, you will have to be held until a judge can set that bond. And also, if you are already out on pretrial, as you heard, a judge, same thing. The judge would have to, you'd have to go before a judge to get a bond set for that. It's not about making higher bonds or keeping people in jail until their court date or anything like that. It's all about accountability on who's setting the bonds and having a little bit more consistency, hopefully, throughout the state.
What does this mean for your officers?
It's a game changer for them. I was actually addressing a roll call this afternoon when I got the thumbs up that the governor has signed it, and I had to make sure that was the case before I told them. But you talk about some very hard-working officers and detectives and just the people within CMPD that work diligently to do the right thing and to make sure that we build solid cases to keep violent offenders in jail, and to make sure they're not preying on our community. And for them to see that people are listening about the revolving door and the issue that people can commit a violent offense and get an unsecured bond with no accountability whatsoever. And now they're going to be in open court. Everyone's going to know who sets those bonds for these offenses, and there's going to be accountability there. And it's a huge message to our officers, not just with CMPD, but across the state.
In regards to, in part, what happened this morning, that charge is not one of these 18, and clearly one of them is now out of jail 4 hours after being booked in. We had another case here recently where we know our surrounding counties, they will set $1 million bonds. They come here, and those bonds are reduced even by a judge. What more needs to be done?
Well, I think the public needs to hold that accountability. And so when you are electing judges in the office that you feel like are not sensitive to the victims in our community, then that's going to be the repercussions of that. And I think that we're bringing attention. We're putting it forth that there is an issue, and not just for the judges. I think the magistrates as well will begin to see that, hey, we have a responsibility to our citizens. And so it is unfortunate, like you mentioned the example, $1 million bond in another county, they come to Charlotte or Mecklenburg County, and it's reduced to hardly nothing. So that's a problem within the system, and hopefully that as we continue to move forward and see what the next steps are, things will get fixed. It's not going to happen overnight, and like I said, this is not the cure-all for it, but I think it's a great step in the right direction.
You and I and your officers have seen repeat offenders of the most heinous crimes get out in within 24 hours do a similar act. What message does it send to those people who, after October, may think twice now?
Yeah, I would hope that there is some deterrence in the fact that they are going to be held more accountable if they reoffend. If you are fortunate to commit a violent crime and get to a bond that you can afford to get out, or that you're able to get out, that you would relish that freedom and ensure that you don't reoffend until that court date and hold yourself accountable for that. I'm not saying it's going to happen all the time, but if we can save one person from being victimized, if we can save one community from being terrorized by some of these violent offenders, then I think we've made great strides in the system. So.
My last question, have you talked to Chief Judge Trosh or the DA since he signed it?
I have not. We have sent text messages back and forth, but I think we're all excited. We all share the same sentiment that we feel that there has been a difference made in the positive direction, in all the legislators who helped make this come to reality. They should be commended for their support of our victims within our state. And all of the support, whether it's the North Carolina Police Execs, North Carolina Association Chiefs of Police, the Association for District Attorneys, all of that came forward and said, we get behind this bill, we want to support it. Charlotte Tourism and Hospitality Alliance, they were really instrumental in helping us get the word out and speaking with different lawmakers to ensure that they knew the importance of this. And I'm just grateful to see what all of the people that got behind what we were trying to do. And it was just an honor for me to be the lead on this and to see it actually come into law now.
Anyone else?
Up to this point, up to this legislation, up till October 1st, when your officers arrest somebody and charge them, what path did they take and how will this change? So if one of those lists of charges, instead of going to the magistrate, they have to wait and see a judge, is that right? Like what?
That's correct. They will still go in front of a magistrate just to develop the probable cause. What the bill does for those 18 offenses or reoffenders while they're out on bond, it does not allow for the magistrate to set a bond. The magistrate will basically hold that individual in custody, and within 48 hours, that individual should be in front of a judge, and the judge will determine pretrial of that individual. So it also gives the judges more flexibility to set no bond, to where someone's charged with homicide or something that is so heinous, an offense that's heinous, that they can set no bond for that individual so that they have to stay in jail until their court date. So it gives a little bit more flexibility, but the entire intent is to ensure that we keep our community safe.
Anyone else? We're good?
All right, thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Chief.
We want you to know that CMPD will continue to lead the way toward a better criminal justice system and safer communities throughout our entire state. We're proud of the work that's been done, and we're thankful for everyone who has made this day possible. CMPD Public Affairs will be putting out a media release that'll recap all the information that we've gone over. We'll also be posting a special message from Chief Jennings and from DA Merriweather, so be on the lookout for that as well. Thank you.